This story, this whole time in history, it's such a dark story for the city and the country, but the film has so much heart and so much brightness, and the people that you spoke to are so they give it such heart. When you were making this film, did you discover things that surprised you about this story, or things that kind of you weren't expecting, or how much of this did you know already?
I mean, I think I think you're always I was very surprised by the resilience and optimism of the people. And you know, there was so much hope in them for humanity and for each other during the siege, and there was so much life um, and just purpose. People. I was just surprised by the way that people survived was by needing to have purpose as opposed to just surviving. And so I was just really inspired by the human spirit and the Sarajevans, and how they were able to cope with such horrific circumstances and never feel like victims.
You capture the resilience in every way. It felt like it starts with that almost. I'm curious, U2 and Bono's story here plays a huge part. It feels like it was the window that brought the news to the world in many ways. Were you there to meet with Bono for the modern interview with him, and what do you think it meant to that moment in history?
Well, the thing that's interesting is I was in Dublin. We did a number of interviews in Dublin, and then Bono got COVID. So we had to postpone Bono's interview, and we ended up doing it remotely, where I was talking to him through the camera, and it was 3 a.m. in San Francisco, where I live, and 11 in Dublin. But the way that we did the interviews was we wanted to make them very intimate and personal. So even when I was in the room with people I was interviewing in Sarajevo or any of the other places, I did all the interviews. We did an eye direct, which is they're looking straight down the lens and I'm looking at them, so that they're having a conversation, obvious, with the audience, not me. And that's why you never hear my voice or see me. So even though I wasn't in the room for that one interview with Bono, it was done in the same way that all the other interviews were done, which was to try and make it a personal conversation between people we were interviewing and the audience.
Well, the idea of music and art almost as weapons at points in this story, really, when they were using the music on the radio to block out messages on the radio and things like that. It's really fascinating. Did you have a favorite part of this story in terms of how art plays a role, even in the individual people who were there?
I think my favorite part in the way that art played out was that Shibby, Boris Shibby, who was using music to break the signals. We call him the kind of John Cleese of Bosnia. um, and then Enos from Siktor. I love the rebellious spirit that these guys had, and that it was something that was so authentic and an extension of their moment in time in history, and the way that they just navigated it. It's not something that was contrived or manufactured, which we see sometimes in music and art and these things. It was just art, I believe, in its kind of purest form. But I think for me, overall, my favorite moment in the whole movie was the wedding. That, to me, a lot of people get, I hear, emotional in the film, but I can't get through that wedding without tearing up.
It's amazing. The moments that you've got in this are shocking in how intimate it feels, in terms of the fact that documentaries often struggle with that kind of intimacy. Did you have footage that was harder to find or get, that you had to include, or what was that like?
I mean, I think a lot of the footage was hard to find from the perspective of I never saw any of it before I decided to make the film. And for example, in reference to the wedding, Vesna, who's the journalist and the woman who's married in the film, She was actually just a researcher on the movie, not just, but that's an extremely important role. But she was a researcher on the film, and in talking with her, she told me how she got married during the siege, and I was I was fascinated by that. And I said, wait a minute, you were married? What was it, just you guys in a room and one other person? She said, no, we had a proper wedding and a party. And I said, is there any photographs? She goes, not only is there photographs, there's video. And so that to me was like finding this beautiful moment of humanity. And so then I went through a kind of long process with her of getting her comfortable to show her home footage of her wedding with the world. You know, at first she didn't want to do it because she didn't want to, you know, it was a very intimate, personal thing, and it was something that was part of their family and not for the public. And, you know, I had to articulate why it was important to share that moment with the world. So there's quite a few things that happen like that where the intent was, we had a very clear intent of what we were looking for and what we felt would be needed in the movie, and that intent yielded, you know, these great moments in finding them that became the film.
Obviously, a lot of people have already seen the film, especially people who must be close to the story. What kind of feedback have you had from people from Sarajevo in terms of this movie?
It's been extraordinary. I mean, we won the audience award in Sarajevo, and I think we screened for like 5,000 people in 3 venues on the opening night. So we won the audience award there, and there's a Bosnian Film Festival in New York, and we won that audience award. And the Ljubljana Film Festival, we won the audience award. And I think now a lot of people have been seeing it on Paramount Plus. So I get messages from all over the world, even though Paramount Plus right now has it in the States and Canada. You know, it's been very special, you know, to get the kind of reaction we have, and I think exceeded all of our expectations. So yeah, it's been wonderful.
That's fantastic. And I mean, I've seen even critical response has been so well received. Did you have a feeling, leading up to releasing it, how special this was? Did you know that it was going to be so well received?
Well, the night before, no, I didn't. And the night before the premiere at the Berlinale, Matt Damon and I were texting, you know, who's a producer on the film, and the film happened because of him. We were texting, and he wrote me, he said, I hope that the world feels about the same way about it as we do. You know, we had so much love for it, you know, like having a baby. And, you know, my reaction was, well, I hope so as well, but all my friends and family love it. So that would just be a cherry on top. And it's been a pretty huge cherry. So we didn't know how it'd be. You know, there's a lot of times you make something in a vacuum, and you believe that it's going to land a certain way on people, and then people perceive it differently than you had, right?
Hmm.
And what was really interesting was when we premiered in Berlin, when we started making the film, war in Europe hadn't broken out. The idea of war in Europe was something that was so far away from our possibilities of happening. It's the same as if you were to say war in the United States was going to break out, right?
Hmm.
And war broke out, and we started making the film during that time. And so when we went to Berlin, Ukraine was top of mind, and that's what everybody was talking about, and how the film was representative of what was going on in Ukraine. And then 6 months later, we went to the Rome Film Festival, and what was going on in Israel and Gaza was top of mind for everybody, and what was happening in the news, and people started relating it to what was happening there. So the film continues to affect people as these conflicts continue to unfold around the world, almost in a way as like a PTSD, you know? So yeah, so to answer your question, we didn't know it would have the reaction it did. And we feel a lot of love that it has.
Well, thank you so much for the time. The film is amazing. It's so well told. The perspective is fantastic. It was a pleasure watching it. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.